Welcome back, everybody. Today's video is going to be the first iteration of a new series that I'm going to be calling Coaching Tidbits, where I take excerpts from my live coaching sessions that I do at twitch.tv/bananaslamjamma, and I basically see this is a valuable lesson, and I'd like to break it down for you guys in a bite-sized YouTube video that hopefully you can apply in your pubs straight away. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So the common question that this video is going to be addressing is going to be when to group up with your team and when to split up and farm. So before we break down some analytical gameplay, let's talk about the general benefits of doing either one. So let's first talk about grouping up. So the pros of grouping up are you can take objectives, such as Roshan or towers. Also, you'll have the numbers to win a team fight, potentially when you have items that you're going to hit your timings. The cons of grouping up is that you're splitting experience with anyone around you when you're killing creep waves or creep camps. And obviously, you're only one of you is going to get gold for the last hit. So you're technically being inefficient. That's also going to cost you map control when it comes to wave clearing if the opponent is doing it more efficiently than you are. So it may be setting you up to not be able to take the proper team fights. So now let's talk about splitting up. So the obvious pros of splitting up is that you're getting more experience and gold off of the map because all of you are as separated as possible. And also you're going to potentially get favorable lane setup where you're going to have more information. You're going to be able to capitalize on that with a smoke gank or pick off. And that's often going to be created by out farming the opponent because you have more items and you also have more information. Now, the cons about splitting up too much or splitting up in general is the most obvious one is getting picked off. And also, it's the most obvious one of potentially by splitting up too much, you're not creating pressure on the map in the sense that maybe you're giving the opponent too much space to come back when you had an advantage. So when we look at the cons of splitting up, it's if you need to get something done and accelerate the end of the game, timings are essential, and splitting up basically prevents you from ever capitalizing on a timing. So this concept of splitting and grouping up, I like to think of it as the breathing of Dota 2. And the reason why I use that metaphor is because if you look at the heroes icons on the map, when you're splitting up, they kind of go like this. And when you're grouped up, they do this. And what's essential about this is what happens in real life when you breathe. If you hold your breath in and just stay expanded, you're eventually going to have to let it go. And it's the same way in Dota where it's going to be a balancing act between the two of these things. It's an often fluctuating which one is correct, whether it is to group up or to split. And the reason why I like that metaphor so much is it's constant and it's something that you consistently have to update yourself on why you're doing what you're doing. And throughout the course of the game, the flip between grouping up and splitting up is going to happen many times, just as constant as you will be breathing. So today, we're going to be talking about how you can apply this in your games and have a much better idea, hopefully, of when to group up with your team and when to split up. So here I am in my coaching students replay where we came to this discussion. So what you're going to see is he's on Dire. He's the troll warlord. He's about to finish his BKB. But what we look at on the map is that him and 3 of his teammates are in the same area on the map. So I would consider this to some degree grouping up. And so when you're grouped up, what was so interesting about this is we're going to play this out, right? How long do they get grouped up for? First off, they're losing by 3K. They're going to group up. They're going to take a fight. As we zoom out, and they're going to win the fight. Very cool. So that 3K lead is suddenly about even. And as we fast forward, right? As we fast forward, what are they going to do when they respawn? Other than the offlane techies with a maelstrom, they are going to be effectively grouped up as 3 with troll farming behind them. So I want you to think that because Troll's farming, but he's also on the same half of the map as his teammates, I view this as like somewhat grouping up in the sense that you're ready to group up. It's not just black and white. We're 5 or we're 5 different places. So farming on the same side of the map, I also put in the category of grouping up. And so what you're going to see as we fast forward is he's going to hit his BKB timing. Fantastic. That is an example of hitting a timing where you want to group up with your team. So we're going to get a few more kills, or at least one more. And notice how they're just kind of running around as 4. Like, this doesn't look super efficient. Now, you're thinking, like, BSJ, when are you going to get to the point? They've just been sitting as 4 for a while now. And this is when I popped the question to him. Because he asked, I wasn't really sure how to, like, end this game cleanly or like capitalize on the map control that we have. Because if you look at the map right now, Oracle's dead. The enemy's kind of like cowering in fear. Under a tower, one guy farming defensively, and the other guy's in base. So what do we do with this situation? The first question I asked him is basically, why are you grouped up right now? So most notably, I like to think of it as a lot of players have a feel for this. Something I've noticed in my coaching sessions, because I have had this come across multiple times, is when I ask people why they're doing what they're doing, like breaking it down after the game, they're able to answer my question. And his example was basically, Legion Commander has a Blink Blade Mail, their main source of pickoff. We're thinking of pickoff heroes like Legion and Axe from the off lane, Storm Spirits and Pucks from the mid lane, or even something like an Ursa from the safe lane. These heroes that are commonly known for picking off in Dota 2 will often be a reason that you're going to group up. And when I asked him, I said, what's the reason? And he gave me, they have a lot of pickoff with Legion Duel, plus the Blink Axe Jules SF. But when you look at the team fight of both teams, this is a bunch of single target pickoff and like one burst ultimate. While they've got the control, they've got the damage over time, they've got the BKB, they've got a lot of things that give them the team fight advantage on the Dire, despite the fact that they have this offlane techies doing some wonky build. But what's cool about this is even though we're seeing like a 3k MMR pub with some weird items and weird things being tried, we see people grouped up as 4. And what was so fascinating about this is I asked him the question and he gave me the right answer. So even if you don't know this answer, what I will tell you is most of you who've played Dota for a while will have a good feel for what the answer is at any given time in the game. And a great question that this video is going to encourage you to ask a million times is, should we grouped up or split up right now? And you can kind of like have a checklist of the pros and cons that we mentioned at the start of the video, maybe perhaps like certain ones that stand out to you that you need to work on or gather some awareness on. And what's going to basically happen is, what I'm trying to teach you guys in this channel is you're going to ask yourself the same question that I tell you is valuable, and over time you're going to get better and better at answering the question. And the reason why we're asking you this question is going to be answered by yours truly. So what happened? We're grouped up because their pickoff is good. And if we were trying to be overly efficient, capitalizing all the reasons you try to split up, they're likely going to pick us off, which is going to lead to less efficiency, map control for them, and overall, nobody likes to feed. Now we're going to fast forward to a crucial moment in the game, which really displays why it's so important for him to know why he's grouped up right now. We fast forwarded a couple minutes. Dire took Roshan, and they're going to take a favorable team fight in the bottom lane, right? Lifestealer's not here. SF's barely going to get his ulti off and live, but the rest of them are going to go down. Now, here's a crucial moment in the game. This is the moment that I paused. Let's just collect information. I know you can't actually do this in a game, but ideally you'd be able to make this decision as fast as possible. Given all of the things that we see, we're just going to show all the heroes that are alive and cooldowns and stuff. And we're just going to look at the creep waves, kind of tell us like what towers are nearby. And I'm going to ask you right now, little exercise question. What would you do to capitalize on winning this team fight? What would you do? Would you group up and push a tower? Would you look for more kills? Would you split up and farm? What would you do? Spoiler alert, they are going to group up and take bottom tower. So they killed the enemy at 23 minutes. So what we're going to see is if you stay grouped, eventually you're going to have lane issues. See how this lane's not going to get pushed? This lane's not going to get pushed. And they're going to take this tower, right? But it's taken 15 seconds to even get there. They had glyph, so it kills the entire creep wave. And it's about 35 seconds later. And what's happened during this time? SF's pushed a creep wave. The enemy's about to respawn now. And the lead's been extended by 1k. The biggest part about this is the reason why it's so important to ask yourself this question of why are we grouped up is because I can rest assure you guys that this is the perfect example of the breathing of Dota. If you don't ever push this lane, it's really hard to collapse the map on the opponent. If you don't ever split up and farm and accelerate your gold, like if you look at Pro Dota, what teams are doing is just getting massive leads and then going high ground. So now, if you wanted to farm, they're going to have to run around as a group again because the Legion's back alive, the Pudge is coming back alive, SF's ulti is going to be coming up in about 30-40 seconds. So what we're going to see is a lot more grouping by them again. They're just sitting as 4 in the mid lane. And what ends up happening is this lane never gets pushed. So we're just in the same game state that we were earlier. This is the exact same game state. 4 minutes ago, the map looks the exact same as it did before. And they have 1,500 gold lead, meaning an extra gold lead, from taking Roche and winning a team fight. They have gained 1,500 gold, and they have put themselves on the exact same part of the map in the same formation. So what's the point you're trying to make, BSJ? What we said is that the game, or the problem that this is creating, is my coaching student asked, how do we capitalize on this lead? How do we progress the game? And I want you guys to see that I'm viewing the game progression as, what is the state of the map? Where are we putting our heroes? And the state of the objectives, right? Sure, you took this tier 2 tower, but like, you're literally doing the exact same thing on the map as you were before. Are they getting any less farm on the enemy team? Are you controlling the map any more than you were before? And the answer is no. So what happens here is, if we understand why we are grouped up, this is the #1 lesson of the video, guys. If we understand why we are grouped up, then we should do the complete opposite, which is split up, when that condition is no longer met. And this is the part that most of my students, if not all, have struggled with. When the status quo of the map, meaning just everyone's alive, they will play properly. But the second that a gank starts happening, somebody's smoking, a team fight is won, a tower's being pressured, suddenly they kind of waver, you know? They proceed to make questionable decisions. So what I'm telling you guys is that this breathing motion is essential. We rewind to the moment in the game that they absolutely wiped the opponent. And I'd like to point out to you guys that while the opponent is alive, this lane is absolutely terrifying to go to by yourself as long as Legion's not showing. This lane's also kind of terrifying if Legion's not showing. So if they want to push those out, they need to bring 3 heroes, or at least like OD sitting behind the guy that's showing on a creep wave. And that sucks for OD. He's not going to be getting any farm. So this moment right here is the moment where we were grouped up. The reason we were grouped up no longer applies because the Legion is dead and SF ulti's on cooldown. And we should immediately split up. Immediately to capitalize on map control. And what's going to happen is you're going to push this lane in. You're going to push this lane in. Somebody's going to push this lane in. First off, that's way more farm. And then by the time that the enemy is respawned, you're going to group up again. So usually the motion would be push this wave 1 or 2 waves, depending on respawn times. So probably 1 wave or 2. And then you're going to reconvene here, potentially smoking again, potentially just camping together with the Aegis on troll. And what that's going to allow you to do is maybe deward this area, walk into their triangle while they're dead. It's going to progress the game. And what's happening in Dota right now is the map is so large that the towers are not a large part of forwarding the progression of the game. It's all about where the enemy's stuck, being able to be the shepherd to them being the sheep and keeping them in their base. And that is done by getting the lanes in and effectively putting them in a room that's collapsing on top of them. So we do that, we regroup, and we're good to go. That's the end of this replay analysis for the sake of this video. The whole idea is, let's also consider the opposite side of this coin, which is the enemy team is alive. When would it be good to split up when the enemy team is alive? Well, if it were simple, you'd always group up when they're alive and split up when they're dead. But that's not the case, right? Dota's not that easy. Well, you would split up when the enemy's team fight is far superior to yours. So with that in mind, if the enemy has really strong team fight, really strong group up, heroes like Necrophos or Huskar that are like really hard to kill but don't really have stuns, then it's hard to ever take objectives. It's hard to ever fight into them head on. But what that does is it means we split up when they're alive, but if we manage to get a pick off or we manage to somehow get favorable numbers and take an engagement that's favorable, then when they're dead, we will take that time to kill the precious towers that we're never going to be able to kill when they're alive because they're going to be grouped up and stopping us. So the key that if we can take the most simple, but not always true, this is an assumption that is going to be true a large portion of the time, but there's always exceptions, people, is that whatever you're supposed to do when they're alive is the opposite of what you're supposed to do when they're dead. So I like to stem it from when they're alive because that's the only way you can be like, okay, there's heroes in the game. What are we supposed to do? And then when they're dead, do the opposite. I hope this gives you guys a nice clear guideline for, generally speaking, when to split push, group up, and when to take objectives while prioritizing farm when the opponent is dead. What you do when the opponent is dead is absolutely how you progress the game, and basically it means you only have to win 3 or 4 team fights to end the game rather than 7 or 8. And that's a lot of the reason that lower MMR games will go on average longer than high MMR games, because of decisions being made while the opponent is dead. Hope you guys enjoyed this first coaching tidbit. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and I look forward from hearing you guys. Like, comment, subscribe. See you guys next time.